Vladimir?
Ambassador, in a few days they would be marking the first anniversary of tragic events in the southern Caucasus. And this war keeps reminding of itself. Most recently at the General Assembly meeting on responsibility to protect, there was a very lively exchange between you and Ambassador of Georgia. Would you please describe the state of affairs, the status of Georgia question, of Abkhazia, South Ossetia question, yes, at the United Nations, given the fact that there is no more United Nations observer mission?
Well, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, we tried with our colleagues in the Security Council to extend the mandate of the UN observer mission there. You will recall that the mission had been there for over 15 years, 16 years maybe, as a part of an arrangement which was worked out in the early 90s after a conflict, a military conflict, which was started by the Georgians when they sort of wanted to enforce their vision of Georgia on Abkhazians and South Ossetia, their vision which did not allow them to preserve their identity. When President Gamsakhourdia in the early 90s declared that there were only Georgians in Georgia, and so there were no Abkhazians, South Ossetians, he stripped them of their autonomy. They sort of didn't like this kind of a deal, didn't accept it, and the Georgians tried militarily to establish this kind of a new arrangement for Georgia, and it caused the first military confrontation of the latest era, if you will, in that region. Basically, the Georgians were defeated, and through a considerable diplomatic effort in which Russia actively participated, some peacekeeping arrangements were established, where Russia was playing a peacekeeping role both between Abkhazians and Georgians, Abkhazia and Georgia, and Abkhazia and South Ossetia. And tragically and criminally, President Saakashvili decided to use military force in order to run over those peacekeeping arrangements and Russian peacekeepers in South Ossetia, and to reestablish the rule of Tbilisi in South Ossetia. And then, as we know, his plan was to move on Abkhazia. But anyway, after that, the arrangements which existed for a number of years, as I mentioned, could not continue indefinitely. For speaking about the situation in Abkhazia and Georgia, where the UN monitors were, because the responsibility of OSCE, South Ossetia was sort of more of a responsibility of OSCE, together with the Russian and Georgian and North Ossetian peacekeepers. But anyway, we and the Abkhazians showed some flexibility and allowed for two so-called technical extensions of that mandate for 4 months. But then, as the situation gradually was stabilizing on the ground there, and as the European Union monitors, according to the Medvedev-Sarkozy plan, established themselves in the areas of Georgia adjacent to Abkhazia and South Ossetia, it was our opinion and the opinion of the Abkhazian authorities that the time has come to adjust the role of the UN to the new environment, which was completely different, both in terms of practicality and in terms of the actual requirements on the ground. And we went through a rather complicated negotiation and rather intense negotiation with our colleagues here, but unfortunately it became obvious that they wanted to maintain certain political elements in the resolution of the Security Council, which were completely unacceptable. For example, they wanted the mission to continue to operate both on the territory of Georgia and Abkhazia, but continue calling it UN Mission in Georgia. Even in those two technical extension resolutions, there was simply a reference to UN Mission without specifying, what countries the mission was operating in. But clearly, it was impossible to imagine that the Abkhazians would allow a mission to operate in their territory when it's called the UN Mission in Georgia. And we were looking for various flexible ways out of this, pragmatic ways out of this situation. But to my great surprise, after hours and hours of discussions of specifics of the new mandate, Some partners came back to us and said, no, but the mission must be called UN Mission in Georgia. And we must reiterate UN resolutions adopted in the past, which reiterated, the territorial integrity of Georgia, which unraveled after the events of August 2008. So now the former UN mission is wrapping up its presence after October 1. They have discontinued their activity immediately after the mandate of the previous mission expired on June 15, but now they are in a process of technically sort of rolling back their activities. However, we do not exclude a role for the United Nations, and we are discussing that currently with the Secretariat and with some other interested parties. For example, we do envisage a continued role of UN personnel in this mechanism which was created for preventing conflicts and for looking at possible conflicts. We do envisage a continued role of the United Nations in the Geneva discussions, where both the military situation is discussed and the humanitarian issues are discussed, both in the Georgia, Abkhazia context and Georgia, South Ossetia context. So we hope that even after October the 1st, the role of the United Nations will continue in a way which will not infringe on the new political reality in the region. And as far as we are concerned, this is of course the fact that two new states have emerged, and Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and neither they, Tkhinval and Sukhum, nor us, are about to accept anything which would infringe on that new political reality.
One follow-up, please. Vice President Joe Biden recently visited Tbilisi, and in one of his speeches he said that Russia used a pretext to invade Georgia. It looks as if Joe Biden has some kind of pet project in kind of...
Well, I don't know about pet project, but I also read the statement in the newspapers. In fact, according to the newspapers, he made that statement talking to children, a group of children in Georgia. And frankly, that was the first thing which caught my attention, because, we do have a difficult political relationship between Russia and Georgia these days after the conflict. I'm sure we are going to overcome that when the Saakashvili regime leaves the political scene. I don't think that even in the context of that conflict, the historical relationship of friendship has been too badly damaged between the Russians and Georgians, because we have had a long history together. For a foreign official to make this kind of a statement, talking to children, raises the question of whether the United States want to instill some kind of long-term hostility between the two nations, Russians and Georgians, the two countries. I hope that was not the case, but certainly I think it could give ground of some suspicions about the motives for making such statements. But anyway,